Okay, so good morning. We're going to be looking at excerpts and ideas from Eruvin 73 to 80. I will encourage you to come back next week because I am deliberately not addressing an amazing story and diyun and discussion about a woman who goes to the mikvah on Friday night, ends up outside of the tchum, is now stuck outside of the city, and there begins a debate whether leniencies can be used to bring her back into the city or whether she's stuck there for Shabbat. Again, fascinating conversation and particularly interesting to me with the work I do in mikvah. And so that's next week. So that's my, when you look ahead, a little teaser for what lies ahead. Right now, we have a lot to do in the next hour and 10 minutes. So we're going to start. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share. We're going to go through the daf. I felt a little bit that last week, it must have been hard to sit for an hour and a quarter listening to me talk about the daf. I know I brought some Mishnah, and I'm going to continue to do that, but I've also decided to bring pieces of Gemara in the format of the traditional Vilna text as a way also of grounding the conversation. So we're opening up on 73a on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. Last week, we talked about a father and his sons sharing a courtyard. It was actually, I thought, a beautiful discussion about the interdependence between parents and children when the parent is supporting the children. And we know, of course, that at a certain point that shifts and children start supporting their parents at times. And so we're not going to go back to that discussion. What we're going to open with is the Mishnah in Eruvin right here, which talks about Chamesh Chatzerot Ptuchot Zo Lazo Uptuchot Lamavui. I'm going to bring pictures for almost everything, so it'll be a little more understandable. We have 5 courtyards which open into one another and into an alleyway. Erbu b'chatzerot v'lo nishtatfu b'mavui, mutarin b'chatzerot v'asurin b'mavui. Now, I spoke about this also at the end of this year last week, that you need to make an eruv chatzerot to allow yourself to jointly use your chatzerot. Here we go. Here is the visual in a moment. I have 5 courtyards. Each one has 2 houses, but of course they have multiple houses in each courtyard. Within the courtyard, they need to create an eruv chatzer, but if they want to have an eruv chatzerot, because look, there's access, there's an opening between each courtyard, then members from the courtyards have to share in some sort of food donation to create an eruv chatzerot. Now, in addition, the members of these courtyards want to be able to use this lovely mavui. And here really is an excellent picture of a mavui. What we have here is the cobblestones, or the paved area is an alleyway, and the courtyards with the green yards, right? They exit onto the alleyway. And in addition, we have the Reshut Harabim. We have the public thoroughfare, which is at the end of the mavui, which is at the end of the alley. And that's one of the critical defining points of an alleyway, that it exits onto a public thoroughfare, and it's somewhat enclosed. We're not going to go back to earlier chapters in Eruvin where they define how enclosed a space must be to be defined as a mavui. I will just say, and this is important for today, a mavui needs to be less enclosed than a chatzer, than a courtyard. So here, if you notice, this exit to the public thoroughfare is completely open. What will allow it to be a mavui halachically, what adjusts it, is a lechi or a korah, a beam that either juts out and across the entrance to the alleyway, or a beam that stands upright in the opening to the entrance to the alleyway. So a mavui is more lenient than the requirements for a chatzer, which must be more enclosed. For this to be a chatzer, we would need more of a wall here. To define it as a chatzer, we would be more stringent. So the alleyway was a leniency to allow passersby often to go through alleyways, and to allow passersby in the public thoroughfare to walk into alleyway, be able to adjust their belongings, put things down, maybe take out a picnic and have a picnic in the alleyway. However, if the members of the courtyard want to carry from your courtyard into the alleyway and back and forth and so on, that requires what's called a shituf. You have to have some sort of contribution, a food contribution from every member in the court of the different courtyards or every member of the courtyard in order to create a shituf. And then we extend our private space from our home into our courtyard into the alleyway. So that's what we're talking about here. And really, this is a wonderful illustration. Going back to our Mishnah, so we have the 5 courtyards open to each other and into an alleyway. They made an eruv for the courtyards, but they didn't make a shituf for the alley. They forgot to make the shituf that showed symbolically that they were extending their unified space. They're now looked at as one courtyard, even though there are 5 distinct courtyards, but they've created an eruv. They didn't make the extension into the alleyway. So they're permitted to use their courtyards, but they can't carry in and out of the alley. Obviously, they can walk into the alleyway. They can use things that have been left in the alleyway, but they can't carry things from their courtyard into the alleyway. Okay. If they shared in a shituf, but they forgot to do an eruv chatzera, so they symbolically showed each courtyard that they've extended their space into the alleyway and created this large unified area, courtyards and alleyway, and each courtyard does this, then they actually, and we talked about this last week, they're permitted to use both. That's the Nechama. Rabbi Meir in the Gemara protests and says that's going to be confusing for the children, because it's very possible what will happen is 2 different eruvs, eruv chatzerot and a shituf. That's a lot of logistical work, collecting it, putting it out, and so on. Once we know de facto, we can just have a shituf. We can just create this unity in the alleyway rather than in the courtyards. We'll just do one thing. Why bother making 2 steps if we can have 1 step? And Rabbi Meir says for the children, we should require, at least in practice, an eruv chatzerot. But the Nechama is very clear that actually the shituf is bigger than the eruv. And so if you do a shituf and you forgot to do an eruv in your chatzer, in the chatzerot, you can carry in and out and between the courtyards. If they made an eruv for a courtyard and they made a shituf for the alley, and one of the tenants, and we talked about this, is a nice review for last week, someone in the chatzer, one of the bnei mavoy, they're saying, one of the courtyards forgot to contribute, they actually, because they made an eruv chatzerot, are kind of grandfathered in to the larger, they're permitted to use both. If they made an eruv for the courtyards and they made a shituf, and one of the tenants of a courtyard, it's exactly what I said before. One of the tenants of one of the courtyards forgot to contribute, he's grandfathered in because of the shituf. Remember, I said the shituf is bigger than an eruv. Here, the tenants did eruv and shituf. This person or this courtyard remembered the shituf, forgot the eruv, grandfathered into the whole package. However, if one of the residents of the alley forgot to share in the shituf, now this is more complicated, right? They only remembered to share in the eruv chatzar, and they forgot to send their contribution to the shituf. They are permitted to use the courtyards, and they are forbidden to use the alley. Okay, and this all really summarizes what I had said. The shituf is bigger than the eruv chatzerot. If you remember to participate in the shituf, you're allowed to use the chatzar. If you forgot to participate in the shituf, there's very little you can do. You can use your chatzar, but you can't use your mavli. Okay, we're moving on. What I want to look at here is a piece of Gemara. I'm going to make it a little bigger for you. And I've put an arrow so that you can follow. And what we're seeing here is Amar le Abaye the Rav Yosef, my tama delo tane ptuchot zolazo. Rava has a girsa of the Mishnah where he eliminates the idea that the courtyards are open to one another. In Rava's version, at least according to Abaye, you have courtyards that have closed walls, and the opening is only to the mavli. So if I would go back to my picture, Rava basically says you can only do a shituf, at least in one of his positions. You can only do a shituf if the walls are closed between the courtyards, and what you have are exits to the mavli. So Abaye says, my tama delotane, in another verse, he says to Rabbi Yosef, wait a minute, I know that's Rava's position. Why didn't he teach my lotane ptuchot zolazo? kasavar kol shituf sheino machniso umotzio derech ptachim b'mavoy lav shmei shituf. So it's not that Rava does not consider this to be a reasonable setup, but what he says is, according to others, to the Tanakama, you can actually go through your chatzers and leave the shituf in one of the chatzers without even going into the mavoi. That's the dominant position. And Rava says, unless each chatzer actually physically exits this end exit into the mavoi, even if they go back into one of the chatzers to put their food package where it's going to be stored in one of the chatzers, that is not a mavoi shituf. Now, again, I'm sure you'll see in a moment that's a classic argument that's going on in this Gemara. The problem is, now, the reason I'm even bringing this is, it brings a lovely little story in which, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. I'm down here. I should really move my arrow down here. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. B'nei chavura shayu misubin v'kadesh aleim hayom hapat sha'al ha'shulchan somchim aleh mishum eruv. Now, I love this story because people have gotten together, big barbecue in the backyards or in the alleyway, or it's actually in the backyard, one of the backyards. And they've all gotten together and they're reclining. They're having a barbecue. Kadesh aleim hayom. And this is a classic sugya in Shabbat, and it appears in Brachot. Do you have to clear the table to make Kiddush, or can you poreis mapa? Can you kind of just throw a tablecloth off? Now you sit down to your Shabbat meal. And you wouldn't even have to wash in between because you're in the middle of your meal. So again, very interesting idea. So they're all sitting around. It's a long summer day. Kidesh aleim hayom. And they didn't make an eruv, except they're all eating together as a chavura, as a community. What is more symbolic of unity, of the unity of all the courtyards joining into one courtyard, than the B'nai Chavura sitting together in a meal as Shabbat begins? So it says here, Hapacha al shulchan somchim aleh mishum eruv. That's enough. The bread on the table in this Friday afternoon into Shabbat meal, that's the eruv chatzera. And some say va'amrei le mishum shituf. And some say that's even a shituf. That's enough to show that they essentially are not only joined together in the chatzer, but that allows them, then that's the shituf for the mavoi. That's how strongly powerful this joining together in a meal Erev Shabbat into Shabbat is. It could even serve as a shituf, okay, which we said is bigger than the eruv. And so, first of all, that certainly disagrees with Rava, who says that each chatzar has to exit into the mavoi with their piece of bread, with their roll, with whatever they're contributing to the shituf, before going back into the courtyard where it's going to be stored. So that's going to be one question we have. But I really like the image of what's going on here. And so, va'amar Rava lo plige. No, there's no real problem here. Kam b'misubim b'bayit, kam b'misubim b'chatzer. At the end of the story, when Rava says, wait, when is it an eruv? When is it a shituf? He's not, Rabbah is not answering the question of Rava about going in and out of the chatzer into the shituf, into the mavoi. Here, Rabbah is saying, oh, sometimes it's an eruv if everyone's in a home. If everyone's in one big home having this barbecue, then the bread on the table is the eruv chatzero. If they've gone into the courtyard, they've moved outside, then that expands the outside space to include the alley. And again, very lovely, lovely illustration, lovely idea. And I think some of us have had that experience, largely on a Sunday, not usually on a Friday, of block parties or yard parties where everyone gets together and we can understand how the actions of the community coming together to eat essentially extend virtually outward to become the eruv chatzerot or the shituf mavoi. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to highlight there. We now get into a question of what do you need for a mavoi? Because as I said, there's a leniency with mavoi that we don't require it to be fully enclosed. And as a result, we permit it with a lechi or a korah, with a beam that stands upright or goes across. And we don't require all the walls to be enclosed as we would in a chatzar. We're not as strict with a mavoi. It's more lenient. And so Rav and Shmuel have an argument where Rav says, in order to have a proper alleyway, a halachic alleyway, then I'm going to allow people to carry in the alleyway, let alone allow them to create a shituf and go in and out of the alleyway from the chatzer to the mavoi, there have to be at least 2 houses and 2 chatzers. Otherwise, it's a joke. It's not enough of an alleyway. Shmuel says, and I'm bringing you what Shmuel allows. Shmuel says, if I have 1 house with a chatzer, and here's my mavoi, and here's the house, 1 house without a chatzer, that halachically contributes to the definition of alleyway. Remember, here's my exit to the Reshut HaRabim. It's interesting that the illustrator didn't bother to put in the mavoi, the lechi or the korah here. I guess you put it in for Shabbos. You don't have it in all the time, I guess. Unless this is meant to be a crossbeam. I'm not sure. It looks like a shadow. So Shmuel would say this arrangement allows these 2 houses to contribute to a shituf mavoi, and then they can carry in and out of their house and their chatzer into the mavoi. And Rav says, no, you need 2 houses, 2 chatzers, otherwise it's not a mavoi. So what I want to bring you here is a little story. Done. It's a story that's interesting because, first of all, it speaks of the ramifications of a difference of opinion in something so practical, right? If one says you can create a shituf and one says you can't, and one paskins, oh, no problem, you can create a mavoi and a shituf mavoi, and the other one says, no, it's usur, then obviously you have a vast difference of opinion in terms of halachic practical approach. In addition, what I'm going to find interesting, I'm going to share with you, is how the Gemara is going to try to resolve this smoothly so the difference of opinion becomes smaller. Okay. Amar le Rav Eliezer Barbei Rav. I'm here where the arrow is. I'll make this a little bigger. Sorry. Amar Shmuel. He says, Amar Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel really say 1 house and a yard and 1 house is enough? The Mishnah says chatzerot. The language of the Mishnah is plural, chatzerot, which means I must have at least 2 chatzers. Here, Shmuel is allowing 1 chatzer. How can this be? He's going against the pshat of the Mishnah, the language of the Mishnah. So Amar Le'en, they said, yes, Shmuel actually passed in that way. Amar Le, Achvele Ushbize. Show me where Shmuel lives. So already to me, this wakes me up a little bit. We have a story. We find out one student discovers that the Rav is more lenient than he could even imagine. And he says, show me where Shmuel lives. And they show him, they show him, Ate Lakame de Shmuel. He marches up in front of Shmuel, and essentially he says to Shmuel, Ate Lakame Shmuel, Amar Le, Amar Mar Hachi? Do you really paskin this way? 1 house with a yard and 1 house is enough to create a mavoi? Is that possible? Amar Le in. Vaha Mar Hu de Amar, Ein Lanu Be'eruven Ela Klisham Mishnateno. But Shmuel, you're the one who says we have to follow strictly the language of the Mishnah. Shahamavoy lechatzerot kachatzer lebatim. And the language of the Mishnah is an alley for chatzerot is like a courtyard for houses, plural, everything in plural. That means I need at least 2 houses, at least 2 courtyards. Ishtik. Shmuel was silent. And I saw a lovely explanation of Rav Steinsaltz, who says silence can mean a few things. It can mean that I am pondering what you're saying, and maybe you've convinced me. It also can mean that I'm not going to bother responding to you because you're not my equal, and I don't have to respond to you. And so ishtik can mean a few things. We don't know by ishtik, by his silence, does he agree with Rabbi Eliezer Barbei, or does he not? So this is going to bother the Gemara. They're going to say, wait a minute. Kavla mine or lo kibla mine? Did he accept the criticism or did he not accept the criticism? Shmuel now dies. No, not yet. Shmuel is not dying. Wait, hold on. There's a story with Rav Ivas. Hold on, I want to get to my story. So maybe it's not here, but I'll tell it to you. Oh yeah, here he is. Okay. Kibla mine or lo kibla mine? In the meantime, we find out Tashma. Poor Ivut bar Ihi. 1 house one house with a chatzer, Shmuel allowed him to make an eruv into the mavoy and use the mavoy, and nothing makes Evud happier than being able to carry from his courtyard, backyard, from his yard into the alley, back and forth, especially children, the bikes, the food, the basketball, and so on and so on. And Avadai Lechia, as long as he put up a lechi, Shmuel said no problem. Shmuel then dies. Ata Rabbanan Shadeh Amar Mavoa de Dayarna Bey. So Ata Rav Anan Shadeh. Rav Anan comes and tears down the lechi and says, "We are not going to allow this." And it doesn't matter what Shmuel said. This is not a kosher. There's only one house and so. Amar Ivu then said to him, "Mavoa de Dayarna Bey." This is the mavoy I live in. Va'atina mishmei Mar Shmuel. Neti Rav Anan bar Rav Mishti Emin. Is it possible that Rav Anan, the son of Rav, which might tell us something, right? He's representing Rav's position, should come and throw the lechi away? So it ends up being a somewhat violent story. Because what we have here is Shmuel paskind against Rav. Then in such a situation, Evud could use his alleyway as long as there's a lechi, even though it's not fully enclosed, it's a mavoy, go in and out of the alleyway from his courtyard. When Shmuel dies, Rav Anan, the son of Rav, comes, tears down the lechi and says, "You can't use it anymore. No, either enclose the alleyway completely or it's lost." And Evud is left, and I feel his pain, saying, "I don't understand. Shmuel himself came and allowed me to use this space, and you're tearing it down? Shma mina lo kibla mine." So now the Gemara says, well, it sounds like Shmuel didn't agree with Rabbi Elazar's objection, with Rav's position, and he continued to allow a courtyard and one house. What the Gemara then does, and I'm going to go through this very quickly, is the Gemara says, no, we don't want to suggest that Shmuel went against Rav in this matter. We have a way of resolving this. The way we're going to resolve it is by saying, really, there were two houses in one courtyard and two houses in the other courtyard, virtually, right? You have to imagine this, because my earlier understanding is Rav Evut was alone in the courtyard and there was a house without a courtyard. That was what it was illustrating. Shmuel going against Rav's position and allowing this to be defined as a mavoi. The Gemara now says, no, don't be silly. Rav Evut shared a courtyard with someone. Again, this is somewhat imaginary. And there was a chazan. And across the way, there was a shul and a house, right? So two buildings in the chatzer. It is true, a shul is not considered a bayit because people don't usually sleep there. But there happened to be a chazan who ate somewhere else, but slept consistently in the shul in Shmuel's lifetime. So with this story, with this added piece, we now have a situation where the shul turned into a quasi home for the chazan, the sexton. It's right, the guy who's there in the morning to turn on the lights. He slept there, so he could be there first thing in the morning. And Shmuel, who says where you sleep determines where you dwell, unlike Rav, by the way, who says where you eat is where you dwell. So again, we're using a machloket of Rav and Shmuel, ignoring Rav, using Shmuel's position in order to avoid a machloket between Rav and Shmuel with regard to the definition of a mavli, which I think is interesting. Anyway, the Gemara tries to smooth it over. No, of course, Shmuel ended up agreeing with Rabbi Elazar Barbe and went with Rav, but I'm left with a question mark. And I feel that Rav Anan bar Rav, who comes, is clearly trying to make a statement after Shmuel dies, and Evut gets kind of caught in the crossfire and now doesn't have his mavoi. Okay, and so that is 74, Ayin Dalid Amud Bet. We're now moving on. Let me make this a little smaller. 75a. We're now moving on to Ayin Hey, and we're going to be finishing this chapter. This is chapter 6 in Eruvin. We're going to be finishing this chapter fairly soon. Shte chatzerot zo lifnim mizu. Erva hapnimit v'lo erva hachitzona. Hapnimit muteret v'hachitzona asura. So what we have here, this case study appears over and over again in Eruvin. By the time we get to Ayin Hey, I've come across it at least 3 times earlier in the Gemara. So it's kind of like you get to Ayin Hey, the book of illustrations didn't even bother bringing it as an illustration. I assume because it's just so common, meaning it's being referred to so regularly. So I'm going to have to explain it, and hopefully you'll understand. I have two courtyards, one inside the other, so that the residents of the inner courtyard cannot exit the courtyard without going into the outer courtyard and out into the street. Okay, so the inner courtyard is subsumed, is completely within, even though they have their own entrance exit, within the outer courtyard. Okay, so what happens here is, if the residents of the inner courtyard prepared an eruv, but in the outer they did not prepare an eruv, okay, this won't surprise us. The inner one is permitted, the outer one is forbidden to carry in their own courtyards. Remember, you have a number, I mean, just to remind you, a courtyard has many houses. So the inner courtyard, they can carry in their courtyard, largely because it's felt their entranceway could virtually be locked and prevent the outer residents from entering, right? They have the luxury of kind of shutting the gate and not letting anyone in because they're the inner courtyard. The outer courtyard doesn't have that luxury because the inner courtyard has what's called drisat regel. In order for them to exit the inner courtyard, they must exit through the outer courtyard. So they have rights of passage. So the outer courtyard can actually not lock its gate to the members of the inner courtyard. Okay, just clarify. So the outer courtyard, if the residents of the outer one prepared an eruv, but not those of the inner one, they are both forbidden. Why? Because the drisat regel, the right of passage of the inner courtyard, essentially it acts as an appendage to the outer courtyard. And so if the outer courtyard has an eruv and the inner one doesn't, it doesn't help the outer courtyard because the outer courtyard contains the inner courtyard. The inner courtyard does not contain the outer courtyard, if that can make sense. If the residents of each courtyard prepared an eruv, each is permitted on its own. Okay, so this is the Tanakama. So the inner courtyard has an eruv, the outer courtyard has an eruv, everything is good, and they can each carry in their own courtyards, and the inner cannot carry into the outer, and the outer cannot carry into the inner, but they each have the ability to carry within their courtyards. Rabbi Akiva, actually, in this situation, each have created an eruv chatzer, and it seems as if that will at least allow each of them to carry in their courtyards. Rabbi Akiva says, no, we always look at the outer courtyard as if it contains the inner courtyard. And if there's no shituf between them, then even the outer courtyard can't carry, even though they have an eruv chatzero. He calls that drisat regel, and the sages say, no, ein drisat regel osarta, if each of them have an eruv. Okay, so if it's a lot, we're not going to spend much time here. I want you to know this Mishnah because this Mishnah is cited often because of Rabbi Akiva's position. Rabbi Akiva feels, and I don't really have an illustration here, but Rabbi Akiva feels the drisat regel of the inner courtyard is so strong that even if each of them make their own individual eruvs, only the inner courtyard can carry. The outer courtyard can't because it really contains the inner courtyard and must have an eruv with the inner courtyard. Otherwise, it can't carry even within the outer courtyard. Okay, that's probably the best explanation I can give. We're now going to move on. So this is a great question. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. If we're talking about inner outer, here's the visual before I read the Gemara. We have, notice here, the difference between what I just talked about and this situation is that in this situation, there are no courtyards. I have houses that are attached one to another, to another, to another, 10 houses, all attached one to the other. In order for the 10th, they all have to pass through each other's houses. Hopefully they've created nice corridors so this can happen. Here's my 10th house. Here's my first house, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there are 2 other houses in the courtyard. So 10 has to go through 9, which has to go through 8, et cetera, to exit 1. The question is, who makes the eruv? Which of these represents all of the other houses? So that, how many eruvs do you need? Do you need 10 eruvs because I have 10 houses? Or is it really like one house because there's drisat regel, there's rites of passage? And so if only one of them, and we'll have to figure out which one, puts an eruv up, that includes all of them. Because remember, they're in a chatzer with 2 other houses. So what the Gemara says is, Eser batim, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Eser batim ze lifnim mizeh, pnimi notenet eruvo v'dio. Shmuel's position is, in this case, the innermost house puts an eruv in his house, and the other 9 are what regarded as beit shar, as gatehouses. Gatehouses, because a gatehouse is an entry-exit point, but it's not a proper home. And for 10 on, from the 10th house outward, all of the other houses are a gateway for him to get out. So Shmuel's position is it's enough to put the eruv in the innermost house. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Afilu chitzon beit sharhu, chitzon shel pnimi, b'may kami falge, mar savar beit shar diachid shmei beit shar, mar savar lo shmei beit shar. Their argument is, without my getting into too much detail, is what about house number 9? If 10 has one house in front of it before all the other houses, maybe the 9th house also needs to put in an eruv, right? So 10 and 9 will both have to have a ruvin, according to Rabbi Yochanan, whereas according to Shmuel, only the 10th house needs an eruv, and it has to do with but how we feel about the Beit Shar, whether the 9th house is merely a gatehouse or the 9th house has more significance on its own, right? Whether it has significance before you walk through the rest of the houses. So it's a machloket of Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel, and we'll leave it as that. Okay, I want to move on. One more example, interesting about a Beit Shar. Here I have a house in a courtyard. Here I have a house in a courtyard, and I have 3 houses lined up in between them. So this house exits into this courtyard. This house exits into this courtyard. Each courtyard puts its eruv in the middle house, and everyone agrees they are now all connected, even though none of the 3 houses have contributed to the eruv. Why? Because house A over here is a gatehouse. House here over here is a gatehouse to this yard. House here is gatehouse to this yard. And in the middle house has the eruv from each of the chatzers, and the house that has an eruv in it doesn't have to contribute to the eruv. So again, just showing you a little bit more about how we're connecting spaces. Not all connectors need an eruv themselves. If it's considered to be an accessory, an appendage, a beit shar to the other house, then it doesn't need an eruv. And so here we have, it will be more complicated if we only have 2 houses in the middle, but I'm not going to go into that because I want to start chapter 7, which is an interesting chapter, and we have a lot of pictures to look at, and I want to make sure we have time. Okay. Chapter 7. Until now, in chapter 6, we had several cases of 2 or more chatzerot joined together in a communal eruv. Okay. In our chapter now, we're going to deal with 2 chatzerot that cannot join in one eruv. They each have to make their own. And part of that is going to have to do with partitions, what creates a portal between the yards and what creates a barrier. When they cannot make an independent eruv, they have to join in one eruv. Sometimes they can choose, do we want 2 eruvs and we're going to remain independent of one another, or do we want 1 eruv? So a lot of this depends on the degrees of separation between the courtyards. If the 2 courtyards adjoin one another and are not adequately separated, and we saw those pictures, right? The 5 chatzers with openings one to another, those are examples of chatzers that can create a communal eruv, and depending on how big the opening is, might have to create a communal eruv. The picture we saw was optional because the breach was not big enough to definitively combine them, but there was a breach that allowed them to be combined. Okay. So if they're not adequately separated, they're one chatzer, they must share a communal eruv. When they're totally separated from one another by means of a partition, they may not make a joint eruv. We're going to see the definite walls and heights of walls and so on and so forth. The object of the eruv, as we've said over and over, is to merge all the participants into one unit or household. When there is a complete partition, we can't possibly consider them as one unit. So what we're going to be exploring here with windows, with walls, with ladders. When is there an opening despite a partition? And when is a partition and there's no way to permit it? Okay. I'll just say the word mechitza, a partition, is a barrier that is at least 10 tefachim. A tefach is something like 64 centimeters squared. So 10 tefachim vertically. It can be a wall, it can be a ditch, it can be a haystack that divides the two areas as long as it's 10 tefachim high. A petach is a portal. I'm going to talk about that. It has to be at least 4 tefachim wide in the partition, and it allows access. And then the area, each chatzer can decide, do we want to join communally or not? And miut, which is also going to come up, an object, platform, or pile of earth or stones, which it has to be at least 4 tefachim to reduce the height of the wall or the partition to below 10 tefachim. And it has to be in place for all of Shabbat. And those are what we're going to look at. Again, if this is sounding a little like, wow, that's a lot of information, I'm going to be bringing pictures that will help us clarify. So I'm just giving it as a promo, as a preview, as a way of, setting you up to know what's in this chapter. And it will become clearer as we see the pictures. Chalon sheben shtei chatzerot. I now have a window between two courtyards, and the window is arba al arba. It's 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim, betoch asara, and this is important, within 10 tvachim from the ground. Marvin shnayim ve'inraksu marvin echad. So I'm going to show you a picture, and then I'm going to go back to finish the Mishnah. On each side is a courtyard with houses. This wall, if it didn't have a window in it, would be a partition that would preclude my ability to join into one communal eruv. But the window, which is at least 4 by 4 within 10 tvachim, creates a petach, a portal. Now it's not breached enough that I say, wow, this is really one space, but it now means I could potentially pass things from one chatzer to another, and possibly a mischievous child could climb through the window, or you could hand a baby through the window into the other chatzer, which means the residents of each courtyard now can decide, do we want to join in a communal eruv because there's a portal, there's a petach, or do we want to remain independent of one another, and each courtyard will have one eruv? That's what's happening here. So we're just going to finish the Mishnah, and then we're going to move on. Pachot me'arba al arba, olamala me'asara, ma'arvin shnayim ve'in ma'arvin achad. And now it tells me not all windows are created equal, so that if the window is higher than 10 tvachim or is less than 4 tvachim, then that creates two spaces. We see the wall as if it doesn't have a window on it. Okay. So now we're going to see a little bit of Gemara. One of the things that's going to come up in the Gemara is, what if the window is partially within 10 tvachim and partially the wall is higher and it goes above 10 tvachim? If the window is at all within the 10 tvachim range from the ground, we're going to look at it as a portal as long as it's 4 by 4. I am sparing you complicated calculations about round windows and squares, largely because it would take me way too long to spend time on the geometry and mathematics of what the Gemara is doing. If you're interested in it, it's 76A and B regarding circumference and diameter. If for some of you that is exciting, those words, circumference and diameter, then by all means, open up a Daf Yomi site, Svaria, and look at the discussion on 76B. For those of us like myself who see those words and begin to turn a little bit pale, remembering high school geometry, then please excuse me for not going into the mathematical calculations. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, where the arrow is and the 2 dots. Rav Nachman now says, Lo shanu ela chalon sheben shtei chatzerot. These definitions, 4 by 4 size of a window within 10 tvachim, makes sense when I have 2 courtyards, because ultimately I'm forcing a portal where there's a wall, and so I need to have specifications, I need to have a protocol to show that there's actually a petach, between what are really two distinct separate courtyards. And I understand, says Rav Nachman, that I'm going to be very particular about a window that separates a window within a wall that separates between two courtyards. Aval chalon sheben shtei batim, afilu lamala me'asara nami, im ratzu la'arev ma'arvin echad. Rav Nachman now says, what if I have a house? What if I go back to this, well, I'm actually going to bring you a picture. This is a little crazy, but I'll show you each thing, right? So in this picture, I have my window that is ben chatzerot, between courtyards. And Rav Nachman now says, I have two houses that are connected with a window. They exit into a courtyard, right? So that's what's happening here. Let's say the courtyard has a wall, has an impermeable wall. And Rav Nachman says, when there is a window, even if it's smaller than 4 by 4, even if it's higher than 10, I look at it as a real portal between the houses. I don't know who would want a house like that, where you have a big window dividing to, instead of a wall, a window, so you can see into people's houses. Well, let's say you live next door to your mother, your sister, your best friend. It's all good. You can lift the window and pass things to one another. Rav Nachman says the standards become more minimal when I have a wall between a window between two houses. Because what Rav Nachman says is, even if it's higher than 10 tvachim of height, houses are filled with objects, and the objects in the houses reduce the window to below 10 tvachim. And again, it's a virtual suggestion. It's a conceptual idea that the window between two houses is a real portal. The window between two courtyards may or may not be a portal. And so he says, when it comes to houses, I'm going to say that even if it's above 10 tvachim, he doesn't say less than 4 by 4, I apologize. 4 by 4 higher than 10 tvachim, I don't have a problem like that. And then the Gemara brings a series, and that's why this picture is up. Rava then says, wait a minute, I have a Braita that says as follows. It compares the window between two courtyards to the window between two houses, to the window, a trap door between a bottom floor and a higher floor. And again, I might have two families living here with a ladder, to the window between two stories, right? And then it even says the window up to the roof, right? There's even I think a window up to the roof. So the Rava comes to Rav Nachman and says, but the Braita seems to compare all of these windows, in which case I would assume the standards are the same, that you need 4 by 4 within 10 tvachim. And Rav Nachman says, no, the 4 by 4 within 10 is only on the chatzer. The rest of them can be above 10 tvachim because they serve as a portal in this indoor space. The only thing that you must have is some sort of access. There has to be sulam kavua, or temporary, some sort of ladder, a trap door where you pull the string and the stairs come down. Even then, if the opening is above 10 tvachim, as long as there's an access to that portal, it could be higher than 10 tvachim. So again, I'm not going to belabor the point. Interesting where the Gemara is going, where the conversation is. And the idea that not all windows are equal. They all create portals. In order to allow a chatzer to be joined with another chatzer, it has to have certain dimensions. But when it comes to within the house, where windows create portals to another indoor space, we could be more lenient as long as there's access to the portal. Okay, we're going to move on now to the next, essentially to the next Mishnah. We are now on 76b. Kotel sheben shtei chatzerot gavoa asara v'rachav arba'a. So we talked about a window. Now we're going to be talking about a courtyard. Look at my houses, my courtyard, beautiful courtyard. And here is a wall. The wall is 10 tvachim high and 4 tvachim wide, which means it's extremely significant. It is essentially the dimensions of a Reshut HaYachid all by itself. And I'm not going to be allowed to carry from the wall into my chatzer, or certainly from my house onto the wall. The question is, can I use the wall? That's what we're going to, so that's the Mishnah we're going to be looking Kotel sheben shtei chatzerot gavoa asara v'rachav arba'a, ma'arvin shnayim ve'ein ma'arvin echad. So I have a wall between two courtyards, 10 tvachim high, 4 tvachim thick. 2 eruvin must be prepared. This is the ultimate definition of a barrier, of a partition between two courtyards. You have to create 2 eruv chatzerot. However, hayu barosho peirot. Let's say they leave grapes, fruit, at the top of the wall. Elu olin mikan va'ochlin, ve'elu olin mikan va'ochlin. Each can kind of hop up onto the wall and eat the fruit. Now, again, I can imagine teenagers doing this, right? A boyfriend and a girlfriend on either side of the wall who want to share a snack, some cookies. They leave the food package on the wall before Shabbat, hop up onto the wall on Shabbat, and they sit there and they have a lovely time and they're above everybody and they're eating their fruit. However, ubilvad shelo yoridu lamata. They can't bring the fruit, the cookies, whatever it is, down into the courtyard because this really is a reshut hayachid. It's its own space, so they can use the space on the top of the wall, but they can't bring it in and out of their private space, their eruv. Nifritza hakotel ad eser amot. However, if there is a breach in this wall up to eser amot, right? We'll see in a moment. Ma'arvin shnayim ve'in ratzu ma'arvin echad. So what we find out here is, look at this lovely pirza, and we're talking about eser amot. We're talking about up to 10. An amma is bigger than, it's a hand's breadth rather than an arm's length rather than a hand's breadth. So up to 10 arm's lengths allows me to see the courtyards as separate, but also I can see them as together. This is an example of I have an option here. We can either create a communal space or up to 10 amma, we can look at it. These pieces of wall nonetheless remind me that we are distinct courtyards. If it's greater than 10 amma, they are a communal space. Then they have to have one courtyard. So again, that's what the Mishnah is saying. We looked at the wall and the imratzu marvin achad v'neshu kupetach yoter mikan marvin achad ve'marvin shtayim. Exactly what I just said. Okay. So what we're now going to look at is a situation. Hold on, there was one more thing I wanted to say about this. So give me just one moment to check my notes. Okay. Now what we have here is a wall between 2 courtyards of uneven heights. And the question is, who does the wall belong to? In this situation, the wall equally divides both spaces, and it becomes a really a makom patur in a way. They can use the top of the wall. They can't bring in and out of their courtyards. By the way, Rabbi Shimon says you can, but we didn't. So that's, Rabbi Shimon sees this as from the courtyard onto the wall and back and so on. But the Tanakama does not, as with many things, machloket. This case is more interesting, because the wall more fully belongs, like the height of the wall, the 10 tvachim, is firmly in one courtyard. In the higher courtyard, the wall is much, much lower, and it's much easier to use. I can sit on it. I can put things on it. I'm just going to stick something on it so I don't stick it on the ground. And so what the Gemara says here is, it belongs for use to the courtyard in which tashmisho benachat. In this case, they don't have equal access. It's not equally inconvenient. It is clearly inconvenient to use because it's at a height for this lower courtyard. It is convenient to use in this higher courtyard, tashmisho benachat. So they get to use the wall, and the other side does not get to use the wall. And this is a situation where they cannot join in an eruv chatzerot. Okay, now we're going to talk about a ditch. Similar idea, and it's interesting. It took me a while to wrap. Why would you want to use the ditch? You might want to put things in it. Again, you're running around the backyard, in the courtyard, and I'm going to put a few things in there to keep it out of the way of the children, to keep it safe. I'll put the food down there while we're busy running around or doing whatever we're doing. And so here too, for the higher space, the ditch is inconvenient because it's 10 tvachim down. For the lower space, the ditch is convenient because they literally can stick their hands in and out of the ditch conveniently. So here we have a situation where the partition partitions, right? It creates the barrier. They can't do a communal eruv. However, one side gets to use the partition and one side does not. Okay, the next picture. Okay. Now I have a situation where, again, here's my wall. It's 10 tfachim high. It's 4 tfachim wide. And I want to open up a portal. How much of a portal do I have to open up to be mam'it, to lower the height of the wall in order to allow me to access or use or create something communal, either to create something communal or to use the wall? And so here we have a situation where I begin to remove bricks, and I'd have to remove them 4 by 4. I have to remove 4 tfachim width, 4 by 4 really, width and length, in order to create enough of a portal that essentially diminishes the wall to the point that now I have a portal between the two chatzers. Now the Gemara says, is there a way for me to create a portal without breaking a wall? What a lovely wall. We like the wall. The wall is good during the week, but the wall is very annoying on Shabbat. We want to be able to have access and create a eruv chatzerot. And so the question is, how can we create a portal without defacing the wall? And so another way to access is through ladders. Ladders are great. And so they talk about, again, a small ladder that's very light and easy to use. The idea is whatever is going to create the portal, if you put a barrel upside down, it's very easy to move. Well, what if you cement it in and the barrel is at least 4 tfachim high? So it reduces the wall considerably, right? Because I step up on the barrel and now I have less than 10 tfachim height to the top of the wall. So I didn't bring you every picture, but how do we create some sort of semi-permanent access to the wall that on one hand, I may not want to leave there permanently. On the other hand, can't be so light that I just move it around on Shabbat. So they talk about an Egyptian ladder, a sulam mitzri. No, that's too light, too easy to move. But a sulam tsuri from Tyre, that ladder, that's heavy. No one's going to be moving that on Shabbat. And so then they say, if there's only one ladder, imagine only one ladder on one side, that would allow the residents of one side to have access to the wall. That would be their portal. That would be tashmisho benachat, and they can now use the wall. But more interesting is if I have 2 ladders, 3 tefachim apart, right? That's all there is, 3 tefachim apart. I've now created a communal space. I now can create a communal eruv. I now have a portal that connects both sides of the chatzer. And I can imagine this being really fun for kids, right? So both sides are now connected. Even if neither side, they don't want to get up on ladders, right? It's too risky. But nonetheless, we symbolically have a portal that connects the two. And I just want to say the dimensions of the wall here are less than 4 tefachim, meaning it's a narrow wall, but the height is what's significant as a partition. And so here we need the ladders to be 3 tefachim apart, no more. However, this is a great picture. If the top of the wall is a full 4 tefachim in width, and I have ladders on either side of the wall, then they can be far apart. Why? Because I can climb up the ladder, go on the wall, walk along the wall. It's safe, it's comfortable, and then go down the ladder. The reason I require I require a small space between the ladders, 3 tefachim width, is because the top of the wall is a more narrow space, and I really need to get from one side to the other fairly quickly. To have them opposite each other is not going to give me the ability to get to the top, turn around, and make my way down the ladder. So I need minimal space to be able to navigate the top in order to get over the top and down the other ladder. When I have a 4 tefachim wall, and you see it here beautifully, I really can use the wall. The wall is a wonderful space. I can climb up the ladder, climb onto the wall, walk up and down the wall. It's great. And then go down the ladder. So 4 tefachim width creates a totally different interaction with the wall. And so then my ladders can be farther apart and I can still look at them as being connected. Okay, we're really going to be continuing now to look at pictures because this is what this chapter is about. this idea of what creates a portal to the other chaser. We started with the window. We then started talking about an impermeable wall without a window where you could use each side, could climb up and eat at the top of the wall, but not pass things from one side of the wall to the other. If you remove some of the bricks and reduce the height of the wall to less than 10 feet, you create a portal. Ladders certainly create a portal. Now we're going to look at something else. Okay. What I have here is a ledge. So this wall is 10 tefachim high. I have a ledge. The ledge doesn't create a portal because I can't hop onto if the ledge were lower down, if the ledge were within 3 tefachim of the ground, I could climb up on the ledge and I've reduced the wall. That would be okay. The problem is the ledge is about 7 tefachim up. I can't comfortably climb onto the ledge. And I now have a ladder that is less than 4 tefachim wide. And so what I'm being shown here is if the ladder is leaned against the ledge, we look at the ladder as if it is extended widthwise to go as wide as the ledge. So the ledge with the ladder leaning on it has now created a portal. However, if I lean the ladder to the side of the ledge, even though we can say, oh, but it looks like the ledge, no, it doesn't work that way because when I get to the top of the ladder, I'm not at the ledge. So important here to create a portal is the ladder, even if it's less than 4 tefachim wide, because the ledge is at least 4 tefachim wide. Once they lean, one is leaning against the other, they become a combined unit. And so the ladder is now expanding the ladder, which is my steps up onto the wall, right? Essentially, the ladder more than the ledge gives me access to the wall. And if I lean it against the ledge, I have now fulfilled requirements of a 4 tefachim width, whatever the portal is going to be, 4 tefachim width, and I've reduced the wall because essentially I've gotten up to 7 tefachim easily. And so now we look at the wall as if it's been reduced to below 10 tefachim. And this, of course, would allow the courtyards to either join in a communal space or not. This is, again, one of these situations where they can decide, do they want to be 2 courtyards and stay separate? Do they want to join together? What we're looking at are different definitions of portals. What I have here, just to show you where the Gemara goes, and the pictures are helpful, is I have a situation where the wall is 19 tefachim. If it's 20, that's going to be the next picture. But at 19 tefachim, how am I going to reduce the height of the wall so that it becomes essentially less than 10 tefachim? Virtually, not really. What I'm going to do is put a ledge at 9 tefachim. I'm going to lean a ladder against it so that essentially at 9 tefachim, I've reduced the first segment of the wall below 10, and then I have less than 10 tefachim to go to get to the actual top of the wall. And so again, everything has now been reduced as if it's less than 10 tefachim, even though it's a 19 tefachim high wall. As long as I have a ledge and a ladder, I've created a portal that has been nima'ed. It has reduced the height of the wall by following these configurations. The ledge is at a height of less than 10. I have less than 10 to get to the top of the wall, and the ladder, regardless of what its width is now combining with the ledge to create a portal. This next one is so the Talmud. I now have 20 tefachim. Oh, what am I going to do to reduce the height of the wall? You should be primed for this. I'm going to have 2 ledges, one at less than 10, one at less than 20. I'm going to need 2 ladders. The first ladder and ledge creates the first opening, but it's not enough because I have another 10 tefachim to go. And so I create another ladder and a ledge, and that creates the next portal. So essentially I have 2 portals combined, one on top of the other, in order to reduce the height of the 20 tefachim to something that virtually is less than 10, like conceptually is less than 10. And the last thing I want to look at before we move on to the next Mishnah is there's a question, how high does a wall have to be? And there are 4 positions, 14 and a bit, because remember, a ladder has to be diagonal. In this first position, you have to get the ladder to the top of the wall in order to see it as a real portal to the top of the wall. The second guy says, no, 13 and a bit, because certainly here it's coming up, meaning 13 and a bit takes me to 9 tefachim, basically to the top of the wall, more than comfortable in terms of getting over to the other side. The next is 11 and a bit. Wait a minute, 11 and a bit means that when I lean it against the wall, it reaches 7 tefachim. I know the principle of lavud, the lavud allows me to close spaces. If I have 3 tvachim between two open, I have 2 poles, 3 tvachim apart, or a wall that has a breach of 3 tvachim, I look at it as if it's been closed because 3 tvachim isn't significant. So in this picture, the ladder is within 3 tvachim of the top of the wall, insignificant. And in the last one, the most lenient, is a 7 tefach ladder, and I'm putting it vertically into the wall. And so even though I can't use this ladder, when I put it vertical, it is within 3 tvachim of the top of the wall, and that certainly is going to be a legitimate way of creating a portal. And Steinsaltz has a lovely explanation. Again, each of them, you have Rav Yehuda quoting Shmuel, you have Rav Yosef, the 4 different positions. I think that we've explained it well enough. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. Charit sheben shtei chatzerot amok asara v'rachav arba'a. I have a ditch between 2 courtyards. It is 10 tvachim deep, 4 tvachim wide. Ma'arvin shnayim ve'en ma'arvin achad. What are you going to do? You have a ditch. Here's the ditch. Forget the board right now. That is a barrier between the 2 courtyards. They cannot create 1 courtyard. Afilu malei kasho tevin. What if I fill it with hay? Can that fill in the ditch? Malei afar utzrarot ma'arvin achad ve'en ma'arvin shtayim. So basically, we say now, if you, there are 2 clauses. If you fill it with stubble or straw, we do not look at it as if the ditch is filled, largely because stubble and straw are very movable, also because animals can come and eat the stubble and straw. So that is not enough of a filler to see the ditch as filled in. However, if we would fill the ditch with dirt and gravel, even partially, right, 4 tvachim high, then already you would have to have 1 area. Sorry, if you fill it completely, we would look at it as filled, even though the ditch still exists. If you fill it partially, then you're going to have a choice, as we've seen. Natan alav neser. What if I put a board across the ditch? So now I can walk from one side of the courtyard to the other, one courtyard to another, with a board. Rachav arba tvachim. If it's 4 tvachim wide, that's our magic number. V'kein shtei guzuz traot zo keneged zo. I'm going to show you a picture in a moment. Marvin shnayim be'imratzu marvin achad. V'chot mikan marvin shnayim be'im marvin achad. So you see that I read the Mishnah. I'm now going to illustrate. If I didn't have the board here, there is no question these are 2 separate courtyards. If I fill the ditch with hay, nothing doing. The Gemara is actually going to go get quite excited about that. What if I'm mevatel the hay? There's going to be a solution for the hay. Let's put that on the side. If I fill it with dirt, then I can look. It becomes 1 incorporated area. You need 2 eruvs. You need 1 eruv. I'm sorry, it's 1 courtyard. If I put a board that is 4 tvachim wide across the ditch, the courtyards can now decide, are we 1 community? Are we 2 separate communities? In this picture, and I love this picture, right? Because they look like they're on the 2nd floor here, 2 balconies right across from each other. If I affix boards that allow me to walk across from 1 balcony to another, right? Those zo keneged zo, one opposite the other, can be to the side or opposite, right? Facing. This allows me again to decide, is this 1 communal space? And we're going to create 1 eruv, and then we can carry from balcony to balcony and into whatever courtyards there might be. Or is it 2 spaces and we don't want to connect, in which case I can walk across the board, but I can't carry over soup or chalent or salad or whatever it is. So again, this is illustrating the Mishnah, why a 4 tefach board can be used to connect spaces optionally. In other words, I can optionally connect, or I can decide, no, we're really very separate. Okay, we're getting a little more to go. Hang in there. Okay. Matbein sheben shtei chatzerot gavoa me'asara tvachim. If I have a heap of straw between 2 courtyards, no ditch, but a heap of straw, for some reason, no illustration to this. I've made an illustration. They make 2 eruvs. A heap of straw that is 10 tvachim high, that's a serious heap of straw. And that creates a partition. And then elu ma'achilin mikan ve'elu ma'achilin mikan. I love this. You have cattle roaming around your courtyard. The cattle can come and munch. This is dinner. This is breakfast. They come and they munch at the straw, each one on their side. The straw on each side belongs to the court, and the cattle come and eat. Okay. Nitma'et hateven me'asarat tvachim. But if the height of the hay is reduced to below 10 tvachim, ma'arvin echad ve'en ma'arvin shtayim. In other words, if the partition is less than 10 tefachim high, we look at it as communal space. We've been talking about that throughout. Okay. Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda. Wait, am I up to that? No, I think I have one more Mishnah right before we get to the last piece of Gemara. Now we're going to ask some questions. Kitzan mishtatfim b'mavoi. This is the last thing we're going to do. Meiniach et hachavit v'omer hareza l'chol b'nei mavoi. Now, I've already told you, and I said it last week, in order to create a shituf in the mavoi, like in the chatzer, everyone's supposed to participate. Now, in the chatzer, I understand, let's say there are 10 houses, we collect 10 pieces of bread, but let's say I have 3 chatzers with 10 houses each, 30 houses that exit into the shituf. Logistically, going around and collecting, now, really, you would only have to collect possibly one representation from each chatzer, but nonetheless, it's a lot more work. You now have to go to 3 different courtyards, collect the shituf. So one of the residents can actually say, Hareza l'chol b'nei mavoi. Take out a barrel of beer, a barrel of figs, and say, this belongs to all and sundry in the alley. Be very nice of them. And that certainly speaks to the unity, the communal space we're creating. And what he can do is, he can give possession of this jar. The Baal Habayit can essentially give this to members of his household who have agency. He can allow them to do it as well for him, be his representatives. And that is his son and daughter, who are over 12 and 13 respectively, and his wife and his Jewish servant or maidservant. Okay. And he can confer ownership upon them, and then they can make the declaration. Great. However, little children cannot do this. They don't have the ability to own. They don't have agency. And not his Canaanite slaves, who essentially are his possessions. Okay. So now the question is going to be, what does this look like? Amar Rav Yehuda. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see. The last, really at the end. Amar Rav Yehuda. Chavit shel shitufei mavaot. Okay, is it really that simple? I just roll out a barrel. I say, okay, everybody, this belongs to all of you. Does he have to do any action to transform this barrel from his to theirs, to everybody in the mavoi? So Rav Yehuda says he has to lift it at least 1 tefach, either he or his wife or his children, who he's given the proxy to. He has to lift it 1 tefach from the ground, and otherwise it remains in his possession. So he has to do something. Okay. Now we're going to get a series of teachings from the Sabe de Pumpadita. Sabe, right? The elders, the grandfathers of Pumpadita. Let's see what happens. Amarava, Hana Tarte Mile Sabe Pumpadita Amrinu. There are 3 teachings by the elders of Pumpadita. Chada Ha'ida. One is this, that you, one is that you have to, sorry, Chadahi, one is this, the tefach. Idach, the next one, Hamekadesh, in Tamale Lugmav Yatzad. This is a very important one. We all do this. You only have to drink a swallowful, a mouthful of wine from Kiddush to be Yotze your Kiddush. That would be enough. V'imlav lo Yatzav. He doesn't drink it. We're talking about Friday night. You have to drink it. Shabbat is a little more lenient, Shabbat morning, because Friday night is a Dovaita. V'imlav lo Yatzav. He has to drink a mouthful, and that's enough. But if less than that, no go. Amar of Chaviva, Haname Same Pumpadita Amrino. Here's something else the grandfathers of Pumpadita said, taught us. Damar of Yudam Shmuel, Osin Midura L'chaya b'Shabbat. You can light a fire for a woman who has just given birth on Shabbat, because the concern for a chill after a woman has given birth is considerable and she could die. Amar of Chia Bar Avi Amar Shmuel, I'm sorry. Savor Mine L'chaya in L'cholelo. I learned from this that only a birthing woman, what about someone who's really sick? Can I light a fire for him? So I will say that Schottenstein put in a footnote, quoting Rishonim, obviously if the chola is in danger and needs a fire, like the birthing woman, then we can light a fire, but only if they specifically need it. A birthing woman is a generic category, and all birthing women need fires on Shabbat to warm up. Biyamot kshamim in biyamot hamalo, but only in the winter when it's rainy and cold, not in the summer. Wait a minute. Itmar amar Rav Chia bar Avin amar Shmuel. Wait a minute, says Rav Chia bar Avin in the name of Shmuel. Hekiz dan v'nitztanem. If you went through bloodletting, if you let blood, osin lo medura b'Shabbat v'afilu b'tkufat Tammuz. You're so chilled. I would say you donate a lot of blood, right? Your body temperature drops. And so even in Tammuz, the hottest month of the year, you can light a fire on Shabbat for someone who let blood and is now chilled. Okay. Amar Amemar. Hanani Sami de Pumpadita Amrino. Here's something else that the elders of Pumpadita taught us. Di'idmar Ezahui Ashera. What is an Ashera tree that what we're not allowed to use? Stam Ezahui Ashera Stam. Amar Rav Kol Sharte Oved Gilulim Shomrimota. Any that the servants of the idolaters, those who serve the idolaters, essentially the idols' attendants. I'm sorry, the idols' attendants, right? Not the shamshe of the idolaters, the shamshe of the idol. Those that are guarded, trees that are guarded, as if the tree is the idol and the attendants have to guard it. The ein toamin perotehen. So the first position that's brought from the elders of Pumpadita, Rav says, it's those trees, they won't even eat the fruit because they guard the tree so carefully because they worship the tree. V'Shmuel amar kigon de amar hane tamre the shifra. Shmuel says, no. It's those trees that have fruit, let's say, even a date tree. So an Asherah is not a particular tree. It's a tree that is worshipped in idolatry. Or, says Shmuel, a tree whose fruits are used, like Shmuel says, if the attendants say these dates are for the beer, devei nitzarfe, nitzrife, for the local idol, tishatu leva yom chagam, which the idolaters drink on their holidays. Amar Amemar va'amrli sameh Pumpadita hilchata kavate to Shmuel. So Amemar comes back and says, oh yeah, that's it. That's what the elders said. They didn't say what Rav says. They said what Shmuel says. We've seen a lot of tension between the positions of Rav and Shmuel throughout this class, and really speaks to that. First, he says, no, the elders agreed with Rav, and no, the elders really agreed with Shmuel. Okay, now the last piece of Gemara we're going to do, so we're going to finish in time, Meitve. So I'm over here. I'm sorry I didn't put my little arrow here, but I'll bring it now. Here it is. We're over here, Meitve, the last word on the line. Meitve ketzan mishtatvim b'mavoy. How do we establish a shituf in the mavoy? Miviyin chavit shel yayin v'shel shemen v'shel tmarim v'shel grogorot v'shel shamin peirot. We bring a barrel of wine, or one of oil, or one of dates, or one of figs, or other fruits. Im mishalo, if it belongs to the individual, tzarich l'zakot. We already said he has to lit it up by a tefach. He has to declare this belongs to everyone. V'im mishalahen. However, if the food also belongs to them, tzarich lahodia. He has to tell them, oh yeah, the food that's in the warehouse that's behind my house, I took a little bit from everyone, and that's what I'm using. Umagbia mina karka mashu. So he has to lift it up a little bit. Wait, ma mashu, nami de kamar tefa. Wait, a trifle. We said my mashu. What is the mashu? Nami kamar tefa. Well, a mashu, a trifle, is really a tefach. It's a hand's breadth. It's a few inches. It's not a big deal. Okay, and so that's the end. That we got up to Pei Amud Aleph. As I said, next week I'm going to pick up with this fantastic story about the woman stuck outside the tchum because she went to the mikveh Friday night, and the machloket does this. How does this play out? I see there's a question. What do you need? You need to contribute every week, right? The erev chatzerot, the shituf muva'od is every week, but you certainly could have the same barrel of wine, the same barrel of figs that is schlepped out every week and is symbolically lifted. Oh, this is our symbol. I don't think if it's rotten or spoiled, it can be used. It has to be edible. But it could be something like oil, which is only oil, wine, and so on, that can stay for a long time. So we schlep out the shituf or the erev chatzerot, and we just leave it there for a long period of time. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't say hello to everyone individually, but it's lovely seeing you, and I hope to see you next week.
Very fast. Nechama?
Yes.